City of Stevens Point, Police and Fire Commission meeting, recorded Monday, July 29, 2019.
To order the 2 o'clock meeting of the special meeting of the Stevens Point Police and Fire Commission for Monday, July 29th, 2019. If I keep talking, eventually everyone will come to order. Oh, it always works that way. It's amazing. Would you please call the roll, Leanne?
Carlson?
Here.
Moore? Here. Ostrowski?
Here.
And Westcott.
Present, Commissioner Kirschling is excused from this meeting today. Please let the record reflect that. Item number 2 on our agenda is the consideration with possible action of the Portage County Ambulance Service Provider Agreement with the City of Stevens Point. At this point, I'm going to call upon Chief Finn and Chief Gemza to present to the Police and Fire Commission in public session the details of the proposed new operational contract between the City of Stevens Point and Portage County. Recognizing Chief Finn and Chief Gemza, the mayor is here. Mayor Wiesa was also a part of the negotiating team, as was Commissioner Carlson, Commissioner Ostrowski. We know Comptroller Treasurer Laddick was instrumentally involved with his calculator, and we're very pleased with that. And if I'm not mistaken, the city attorney might have had a role in this too. So it was clearly a team effort. A lot of work, a lot of ground has been covered. So I want Chief Finn and Chief Gemza to take some time. Chief Moody is here too. I'm sure JB was involved. Did I forget anybody? Mary, did you have a role here? Okay. Chief Finn, you have the floor, and we eagerly await your report, sir.
No, as you're correct, President Westcott, I'd like to thank the negotiating team from the city. It was a long, tedious negotiations. There was a turning point in the beginning part of this year. I also would like to thank the county exec, the sheriff, Chief Deputy Boline, Dave Ray, the city attorney, or the county attorney. That once we got through all the red tape and we got to the topics, I truly believe that the county wants to do the right thing. The highlights of this contract is the last contract was 6 or 7 pages. This is 36 pages. But the highlights are it's a 4-year contract. I'll let the comptroller talk about the money aspect if you guys have questions about that, because when Comptroller Laddick says the money works, I believe him. One of our sticking points was language that gave them access to our records, to our run reviews. Chief Gemza negotiated with Jenny Josie. There is language in there that they can access our run reports for the finance director only, for billing purposes only. So they cannot go on any fishing expeditions and start going after guys and girls of the fire department. It's a 4-ambulance contract. The 5th ambulance will be still at Stevens Point and equipped. We went back and forth on that. There's some capital, and I'll let Chief Gemza talk about there's some capital stuff in there so that we're involved with the capital improvements of the county for the EMS system. Over the last 3 or 4 months, I think the sheriff's office and the providers have met with the intent of providing the best service to the citizens of Stevens Point and Portage County, and that has not always been the case. I think past administrations from the county had it in for the city, or a dislike for the city. That's well documented, and I think this administration at the county wants to provide the best possible care to the citizens of Stevens Point and Portage County. We remain a 2 paramedic ambulance. Which was by directions of this body that we remain a 2 paramedic ambulance, which we did. I I know I'm missing something. So I'll let Chief Gemza get up here and talk, because he's better at talking at it than I am.
All right, Assistant Chief Gemza, would you step up, please, as the chief in charge of EMS? We'd like your comprehensive overview. You don't have to do it quickly, Joe, because I know you spent a lot of time on this.
So really what we, after a long period of time of having discussions and not getting very far, I think what both sides did was we sat down and realized we needed to get on the same page and find out what each person had, or what each entity had issues with. And once we kind of were able to get to talk the same language, I guess I equated it to an interpreter misinterpreting what each side is saying. Once we were able to get that done, I think we were able to focus on the goal for Portage County, which is bringing EMS forward and bringing it into an operational I guess, utopia with all three service providers. Coupled with the fact, what we realized was that there's three service providers in the EMS, the county EMS overview, and we were all operating in our own silos. And once we were able to sit down and say, okay, what is your issue? What is your issue? We were able to reach common ground. We were able to, I guess, basically make ourselves visible to each other and say, this is how we envision EMS to be. This is how it runs. Because remember, a lot of the people we were negotiating with have an overview of how EMS run, but not a real down and dirty of how EMS runs. So after education and us taking a step back and listening, we were able to come up with some really good ideas and some stuff. The service providers will get together and with the medical director, and we will get back to providing quality management of the system, where we look at it and say, how can we be better and how can we get it better as a group, as opposed to, and no disrespect to politicians, having politicians try to tell us how to do that. And so that was a big stepping point. The county acknowledged that the EMS coordinator position needed to be tweaked a little bit. It was a 12-page job description. It was very large. It was very cumbersome, and they duplicated many services that each service provider already gives them. They revamped it and said, hey, what do you guys need an EMS coordinator to be? And they listened to us about that, and so they rewrote that to look into it and say, okay, we need somebody who can bring people together, we don't need oversight in that aspect of, you need to tell me one thing to this thing. We need somebody who can bring everybody together and talk about it. So the service providers meetings, which would be really good, they were receptive to the idea of capital improvement. As we know, we've had some issues with ambulances and some equipment that we can't quite seem to get replaced, and returning of monies and where monies go, so on and so forth. We were able to sit down, and they agreed to have at least an annual meeting with the service providers about a capital improvement. In other words, what do we need on that ambulance? What's running its lifespan? Doesn't mean that we have the total say, but ultimately understanding that we have a voice in that expectation. So that was very good. We went through a lot of discussion about the comm center and some of their requirements. Remember the 2-minute turnout times and all that, and how we were going to verify that. And I think by them looking at the whole system, they took all the monetary issues out of there and said, you know what, let's just have a conversation if there's a problem. And I think that's really what the 36 pages brings us to. It's a lot of reading, but I think what it does is it lays out the county's expectations. And after talking with them, it was this language that says, look, we're not going to be in a microscope looking at everything you do, because it's kind of written down here what our expectations are. So that made us feel very good about it. And again, as far as the money goes, I know comptroller and myself are fairly comfortable with that. We had some conversations about returning the money, or what happens with the extra money for being fiscally responsible. As far as ordering supplies, we will be working under their Munis system as soon as they get that up and running, and that's their ordering system. And the hope there then is that, well, not the hope, what is explained to me is that Lieutenant Ramon does the EMS supply ordering. He will know what his budget is, every day. He'll be able to log in and know what that is, which is good, because when you talk about wanting to make sure that the monies are spent wisely and correctly, he can look at it and say, oh, I have XYZ amount of money here. I'll put in for the order. And then it just follows the whole county's seamless transition into the ordering process. And I say seamless because I'm assuming it's seamless. That was an inside joke. First responders, there's going to be no change. The one thing they did change, though, I mean, as far as staying underneath each service provider, the one thing they did change is the more things change, the more things stay the same. They'll be coming back under Plover, Amherst, and ourselves to get supplies, which is a very efficient system. So we can order bulk supplies and we store them at the station. If they need something, they just can call it any one of the 3 providers if it's closest for them, and come pick them up as long as they fill out the proper paperwork. And then that way, it's convenient for the first responders. So if you work in Point, but you're Almond, let's say, you could still stop by the Stevens Point Fire Department and pick up those supplies, because they're just going to fill out a form and it'll go to the county for their billing. And the same thing if you work in Amherst, but are in the town of Dewey, but are serviced under Stevens Point. Whatever works easiest for you. We're 24/7 so that they can stop in and do that.
Chief, it is my intent really to go through a presentation. I'll have some questions for you and Chief Finn in a moment. But let me call upon the Comptroller Treasurer. Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to make a few comments, I'll call upon you next. Then I know that our commissioners want to hear from our negotiating team here. But I already have some questions, and I'm sure when my friend the Comptroller is done, because I like math as much as you do.
Sure, absolutely. So the quick math on it is really most of the costs with the EMS service that we provide are personnel related.
Right.
So our cost increases are tied to increases in personnel costs. We do have a 3-year agreement with the fire union, which was recently signed, with 2.5% across the board cost of living increases for each of those 3 years. That's about the going rate right now as far as the public safety union wage adjustments. So what we told the county was that we needed something in line with that we also needed the amount that we're getting for providing this service, or the budget for this service, to also go up by 2.5% per year. In the past, our contracts have ranged anywhere from 1.5% to 3% as far as the annual adjustments. In this contract, we agreed to 1.5% for 2019, and then 2.5% for 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So basically, in the big scheme of things, that first year, 2019, we are giving up a little. It was a concession on the part of the city to basically run the EMS budget a little bit tighter, a little bit closer to the edge. It's something that myself and the chiefs have talked about, and we feel comfortable with that. We definitely did not feel comfortable cutting it any tighter, but we did feel comfortable in working within that. And then, of course, we have the assurance that then over the next 4 years, we'll have increases of the 2.5%, so that it will keep up with what we've negotiated in terms of wage increases.
What is your sense of the capital costs associated with this, and how that might be proportionately shared or not shared or determined or analyzed moving forward?
Okay, so capital costs, when we originally started talking about this contract, the county had indicated that they wanted to make the providers responsible for capital costs, and we did work in that direction. We did sit down and put together a plan as far as what it was going to cost us. And then what happened, I want to say in March, the county actually changed direction and said that they would continue to provide the capital. So that was a pretty significant change in that the providers aren't responsible for replacing ambulances or replacing heart monitors or anything like that. That is staying as the responsibility of the county. But one provision that we also were able to get included, because it's really easy to ignore capital, and I think you have that challenge at all levels of government as far as to ignore the need for capital investment and capital replacement. So part of the contract is to have an annual capital planning meeting to make sure that this stuff doesn't fall off the radar screen. If we have heart monitors that need to be replaced in 2 years, or an ambulance that's at the end of its useful life. And then we also got a provision in there that they're also going to follow the capital plan, that it'll be reasonably adhered to. So not quite stuck like glue on it, but some assurance that, okay, you know, if we have a capital plan and we say we're going to replace ambulances at this interval, we're going to reasonably adhere to that. That, you know, there could be some flexibility there if something truly doesn't need to be replaced, but at the same time, we don't want to see just we don't have, you know, budgets are tight and we don't want to raise taxes, so we're not going to give the providers the necessary equipment.
So the capital planning would become, or remain a component of the county, but under the county budgeting process.
Yes.
So there would be this meeting that both you and Chief Gemza have alluded to, where there would be input from the city. We have heart monitors, we have the following pieces of equipment. We get them included in the capital plan, and you now have some assurance that that would move through the process and not disappear a month or two down the road at some county meeting. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, yep, and that's the plan, so that they would have an established formal plan, you know, in writing, that kind of sets that guide.
Well, I've often felt, and I think my colleagues on the commission, and I know city officials would agree too, that when you have professional recommendations on medical equipment that is ending or nearing the end of its useful life, you need to take those recommendations, as I know you do too, very seriously, and not say, oh, we can wait another year. You really can't. All right. Anything else, sir, at this point before we come back for questions? I'm going to call.
The only other note to make is that because for the year 2019 we didn't get quite as much as we expected, we are planning to do a budget amendment for the ambulance budget for 2019, just with the updated amount.
How much would that be, sir? Have you estimated that yet?
Yeah, it's going to be about $30,000. Because we budgeted for a 3% increase, and then for 2019 we got 1.5%. So, and actually Assistant Chief Gemza and I have already started working on those numbers as far as where there might be some flexibility to find that. So.
Good. Thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate it all along. The frequent updates that we were receiving from you, and the candid nature in which you were presenting that. So, Corey, thank you. I know you work very hard. Mr. Mayor, I assume you'd like to address the commission and provide some thoughts, because within a little bit you're going to present fundamentally the same thing to the common council.
You saw that subtle hint when I moved closer to the lectern?
I started ignoring subtle hints years ago.
So, just a few points that I wanted to say. First and foremost, I think everybody at that table had the best interests of the citizens of Portage County in mind. Chief Gemza hit it right on the head. I think a lot of the time that it took to get this done was just kind of speaking maybe different languages. If you recall, this used to be under the purview of the county executive and the county board. It moved over to the sheriff's office. So it was kind of a new experience for them as well. And it wasn't without its moments, but what we did was we stayed focused on providing that best service. Stevens Point provides the only currently 2 paramedics service to the citizens of Portage County. And that's what the key was, right? Everything we negotiated was based on that. I'm a taxpayer, you're taxpayers as well. It's our money, but we need to make sure that we're providing the best service. And that's what it really came down to. We had to hammer out details in language on several things. We weren't quite sure what a lot of the terminology was. We wanted to just be very clear on that. And in the end, I think we've got a pretty solid contract. That puts us in a good position for the next 4 years, and we will continue to provide that excellent, top-notch service to the citizens of Portage County.
Mr. Mayor, I thank you too. I know how invaluable you have been to this process, and I appreciate your hard work as a member of the negotiating team. And I certainly appreciate the frequent updates you have provided to the Police and Fire Commission along the way. At this point, unless you have something else to add, I'd like to ask both Commissioner Carlson and Ostrowski were assigned by the commission to the negotiating team. You attended a lot of meetings, a lot of time. I'm interested in your thoughts, an overview on the new contract. Commissioner Ostrowski, would you like to begin first, sir?
Sure. It was very interesting for me on this since I was involved in the contract prior also. I was a new member of the commission at the time, but I was involved, and I think it ran 3 or 4 meetings. This one, I believe at my last count, is something like 22 or 23. So it was interesting, and I think it was caused mainly by a couple of things. One is there seemed to be a lack of understanding of each other, and especially about the simple matter of transferring a service to another authority, and everybody would understand what's going on. It took several negotiation sessions to get that understood. There was also a lack of trust, and I will say it was big on my part too, because I didn't trust the guys on the other side too much by what some of they were saying, and I'm sure they felt the same about, I know they felt the same about us. The third thing that bothered me is we went into those meetings with 3 or more possible ambulance services. We're supposed to accept 1 in the same contract. That wasn't going to fly right from the start. I knew it. I think once we established that we were negotiating for the city, that maybe we were going to influence the other ones, but we were really had the heart of the city in mind, it cleared up and it moved forward much better. I do think overall Portage County is better today than we were when we started, because I think the trust got established, I think the understanding got established, and the understanding that each program was separate. We didn't get everything we want. I myself would like to have seen power load added to the list of equipment, but that is not on there. I'd like to have seen a definite schedule of replacement of ambulances, because I was involved to see what happened the last time the schedule fell apart. But all in all, I really believe that after a lot of work by a lot of people, the trust and understanding is there, and it's a much better contract, and we can live with it.
Commissioner, thank you for your work. As you mentioned, it was quite a few meetings, and that is a lot of time. Commissioner Carlson?
I just want to, what I have to say will be brief because I think it was covered by most everyone, but every negotiations, every contract settlement I've been involved with, you know you've done a good job of compromise when both sides feel they've given up something to make it work. And I think that's what happened here. Both sides feel like they gave up a little something, but in the end, the bottom line is the quality of service for the residents of Stevens Point, Portage County will continue, if not get better. I've said this before in past meetings, but I think the biggest part of it was education, and Chief Finn and Assistant Chief Gemza were the MVPs on that negotiating team in educating everyone at that table, both city and county. I learned so much, and I thought I knew everything, but I learned so much about the EMS system just being at those meetings, and I think the people on the other side of the table, the county, learned a lot too, and you opened eyes and you made it work. So good job to you two guys. Good job to everybody. And as Mayor Wiesa said, the bottom line is the service will continue, if not get better in the future. So the people in this community all benefit from everybody's hard work those last 22 meetings.
Commissioner Moore, any thoughts before we open it up for questions here? Any?
No, it's been a long road, and I'm just glad we're finally to this point.
All right. Commissioner Gemza, excuse me.
Congratulations,
Joe.
Congratulations.
I need to know where I'm at.
Demotion.
Am I getting sworn in or what?
Actually, you were demoted.
Sworn at. Yeah, that's about part.
Joseph, I have a couple of quick questions, and we'll open up for commission questions, and I will return. There has been so much talk along the way that the other ambulance providers, now I know these are 3 separate contracts, but both you, Chief Finn, the mayor, I think everyone has alluded to the fact we're going to remain a 2 paramedic system, which is absolutely critical. And as we have discussed so many times at this commission level, there are so many times we're really more than a 2 paramedic response in the city of Stevens Point. Our engine companies, the rest, towers, all maintain paramedics. We can place multiple paramedics at the scene for a variety of critical incident needs. Can you give the commission any insight as to the direction the other ambulance providers will be moving toward in the future? Right now, they're both 1 paramedic systems. Is that correct, Chief?
That is correct. They have the variance till, or the letter saying that they can operate as a 1 paramedic system up until the first of this year, this upcoming year. DH 110 is going to be changing. It's gone through most of the rules at the state level. So I would anticipate in about another year from now, you'll see the new DH 110. DH 110. DHS 110 is basically the Bible or the guide to providing ambulance service in Wisconsin from the state. They've revamped it to allow the one paramedic rule for services that are below, that have their main municipality below 10,000. And anything above that, if you were providing a 2 paramedic system, you had to maintain the 2 paramedic system. So if you look at it in that snapshot, the way the rule is currently written and what I would anticipate will pass will be that Amherst will be able to go to a 1 paramedic system, remain a 1 paramedic system, and Plover will have to maintain their 2 paramedic system.
Because of population.
Because of population, if you just go after population. Last 2 weeks ago, the state had rulings, hearings on this. I listened to it via the computer, and I know Amherst and Plover was down at the state during those hearings also. And we've been in contact with Medical Director Michael Clark, who also sits on the board for those changes too.
Joseph, I know another issue that had been the subject of quite a bit of discussion over the last few months was that of access to patient records.
Yes.
It had been at one point, at least I perceived as somewhat of an impasse. Tell us in detail again how that issue has been resolved to the satisfaction, because I know you and others in the city had legal concerns about HIPAA and privacy. The county felt it had to have some access. Tell us again how that has been resolved.
So we'll take this one little bit at a time. We'll start with the medical record access for billing purposes. So because the county collects the taxes and then they send out the bills for the ambulance service, they had some heartburn about Medicaid and reimbursement, and if they needed to be audited, how they would have access to those records. And so what we had agreed upon at that point, which seems like a valid concern, and we did look into it, was that we would allow, and they directed Jenny Josie would be the one that would have that access. So we will grant her access for medical billing purposes to review a run based for medical billing. So she's not, no medical history. We're not going to have people coming in and going, why did you give fentanyl as opposed to Narcan, and that's the wrong medication and the wrong dosing and all that. It will be more for documentation. So she might call me up and say, Joe, the billing company has some problems with line 14 of the PCR, patient care report. And in there, we've noticed that 9 out of 10 of your paramedics haven't gotten a signature for something. Okay, that makes sense, right? We can live with that, because what happens if they bill incorrectly for something, then Medicare and Medicaid comes in and they audit us, and so that's not. And we also want to make sure the county can bill appropriately and being reimbursed appropriately for those things. We will maintain a history log on who makes access and how they make access, so that'll work out good. So I think it was a really good compromise. once they sat down and explained to us why they felt they needed patient care record access. So that changed a little bit. Originally, it was everything, and then we were able to get them to come down to like really why did they need that access, and this is not an uncommon thing for billing companies to have access for. So
Wasn't there some discussion about a software conversion? What was the status of that?
that has all been dropped as of right now. So we're going to maintain the software that we have that works with the state, the image trends, and we'll import directly into wards.
All right.
So.
Software we're comfortable with.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Software that we are comfortable with. As far as the continuous quality improvement, we sat down and we said, okay, what does the county want for continuous quality improvement? What do we want? Because again, that's a huge thing, right? So we decided that we were going to get together, the group, the service providers, medical director, and we were going to decide what we wanted to look at. And that would make the most sense, right? Because if I got a vested interest in making us better at that, then everybody's gonna play a little better in that sandbox. So we're gonna get together. Like the first one's going to be cardiac arrest. We're gonna look at cardiac arrest and we're gonna see how each service does. With that, the agreement was that, like we had always maintained, and I think this is where that language gets into, you will have all the access you want to the data that you want. In other words, we went on 27 pulseless non-breathers, we provided CPR to 15 of them, we placed 12 advanced airways. Of those advanced airways, 10 of them were successful, another one ended up with a backup airway, right? They will have all that access so that we will be able to provide a system-wide continuous quality improvement so that we can look at it and say that this is what Portage County does, but we're also going to maintain a certain amount of our own so we can look at it, so I can look at it, or my officers can look at it, or my medics can look at it and say, how good am I? How good are we at that? So, and that's really the key, because in order for paramedics to get better, they have to know where they're weak and where they're strong, right? And so that's going to really help us, I think. So once we were able to sit down and kind of draw out the bubbles of what data was and what a patient care report was, what they thought they needed, and what we were willing to offer, it became to be what we were willing to offer, and they were more than happy with that. So.
I have one more question, then I'll open it up to the commission I may have some follow-ups, but how do these contracts, we now have contracts with the city of Stevens Point, as all of you, including the mayor, reported. There's a contract with Amherst, the contract with the village of Plover. How do these contracts address medical direction?
The medical direction, we will have our own ability to maintain our own medical director if we wanted to, which was another sticking point, that we wanted to make sure that we had somebody we were comfortable with and not somebody that they were just comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, again, Dr. Clark was just in today doing patient run reviews with our guys. That's a relationship we have to be comfortable with so that the medics are comfortable talking to the medical director, and the medical director is comfortable with the people that they license. So each service will be able to provide their own medical director if they choose. Obviously, the county would like to have it one, but again, they understand that at some point there might be some disagreements on certain things.
All right, other questions from my colleagues?
I'm good.
Commissioner Ostrowski, you look like you have a question.
Well, Joe, I guess I would just like to say that I still don't fully understand, what if another agency is there any, I've got a copy of this, what if there's another ambulance service involved? Does that?
That is a great question, and I don't have the answer for that, because I will give you the classic example of a fourth ambulance service that's in Portage County that we have no idea what the county's plan is, and that would be United Ambulance, that contracts separately with the town of Grant, as we know, but we really don't know what the county's plan is with the United Ambulance Service. This contract does say if we're called anywhere within the borders of Portage County, we're going to go. There's not going to be any changes. You know, we still go down to Plover. We still go out to Amherst when we're called, and there's not a problem with that whatsoever.
My other one, Joe, would be is the Rapids Response Unit definitely gone? It's out of the system?
That is not addressed in the contract. That will be addressed after the contract is signed.
Okay.
And a classic example of that would have been this weekend's car crash up off of Wilderness and Jay, and we just reviewed that with the crew that was on that, and they talked about how important that lieutenant on that RRU was with multiple patients and being able to direct the extrication team from Rosholt and the first responders from Rosholt, and making sure that the medics could focus on patient care as opposed to the actual extrication and stuff like that. So those things just reaffirm our belief in that system and how it works.
Go ahead, Chief Finn.
The conversations I had with the sheriff, that I think the sheriff now understands, like Chief Combs just said, the importance of that vehicle. So although it's not in the contract, once the contract is signed, I think that we'll be able to come up with some type of arrangement to continue running the RU, because I know as the chief of the Stevens Point Fire Department, Assistant Chief Kamza, Chief VMS, that we both think that that's a valuable tool in our toolbox to provide to the citizens, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we maintain it.
Chief, one more question. Although, of course, I would always have many, because this is one of my pet projects, as you well know. But talk a little bit about the continuing role of the EMS oversight or advisory group, a group that really, under statute, enjoys no real authority here, but will continue to live on. So what role will they have in the future?
As of right now, the county and the city are going to evaluate the need for the oversight board and the effectiveness of it. And I think at some point we'll come to a decision on whether or not it's going to continue, or if it may be dissolved and move more back towards that provider, the people providing the service, and a couple key players in a meeting having discussions about what it needs to be. Because I think all sides agree that it's kind of a political limbo. I think Mary can attest to that. You're not exactly sure what you're agreeing to, you're not exactly sure what you're disagreeing with, and you really have no idea what authority you have in any way, shape, or form.
Well, it has always been in that real legal limbo area. You have an optional powers police and fire commission with full statutory authority, and you have this advisory group with no authority, basically advising the ambulance service on how it should operate. So it's always been kind of an interesting quirk in our local governance. Joseph, one final question. What year did we fully operationalize the paramedic program in the city of Stevens Point?
2000.
Right.
December 1, 1999, I guess would be the day we went operational.
We are about ready to enter our 20th year, and I can't think in all the years of service that many of us have had to this city and to this county, many of them in law enforcement, many of them in our streets programs, but I can't think of anything that has been a more significant, life-saving product created in the county, in the city of Stevens Point, in the fire service to save lives, reduce pain and suffering. And I think it's very interesting as we enter our 20th year, we go in with a new, stronger contract. So congratulations, as Mr. Mayor said, to all who worked so hard on this. Corey, I know that you have a lot of hours in. Mr. Mayor, you too. Our team on the commission. But of all the things, I think government, this is an area where government can really shine, where we are really providing a beneficial, life-saving service to the people we serve. And it gets better every year because of the professionals from Commissioner Gemza. All right, I'm just seeing if you're paying attention there. Chief Finn, Chief Moody, all of our paramedics and staff, and those who support it. We are a growing, thriving community. We hear that all the time from the mayor. and others. And one of the things that makes this a thriving community is the fact that we provide the quality of life services like we have in our law enforcement, in our police, in our fire, in our EMS areas. So, congratulations. With that, I am going to move
Excuse
that.
me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Before you make a motion, can I,
You may.
I'm assuming you're gonna make a motion to pass this, but there are there are a couple changes that might have to be made.
Okay.
I'm just saying, so if they're not substantial, that Chief Gems and I in the county could work out, just verbiage or something that you guys, if we make them changes, we don't have to come back before this body. That's all before, put that in your motion, that anything substantial, we have to come back, obviously, but there's some language changes and spelling corrections before the final version gets out there. I just wanted you to be aware of it.
Thank you, Chief. I'll move approval of the ambulance service provider agreement between Portage County and the City of Stevens Point with the following provisions as outlined by Chief Finn, that if there are non-substantive editorial or basically writing areas that need to be corrected or updated, you have the authorization from the commission to proceed. Anything substantive in your nature as the chief of the fire service, I'm going to ask that you return it to this commission, but if it is not, you will have our permission to do it. I will also need, as part of this motion, to approve this 4-year contract as we go into our 20th year, authorization from the Police and Fire Commission for the president of the commission to sign the contract. With that being said, that is my motion.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Carlson. The motion, as you have heard, is to move forward. Would you please call the roll?
Carlson?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Ostrowski?
Yes.
And Westcott?
Yes. Thank you again to all. All right, with that said, I'm sorry.
I just want to be, this
We
body.
need to move him closer
No,
to
I
you.
just want this body to be aware. The next step is, since you did this, it will go before personnel or finance, I'm not sure, on city committees, the second Monday, then the city council for final approval. So I just want to make sure everyone knew that.
All right, thank you, Chief. And again, thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move to item 3, which is our adjournment into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or the performance evaluation data of any public employee of which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility for a firefighter or paramedic applicant interview. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn into closed session. Would you please call the roll, Leon?
Carlson?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Ostrowski?
Yes.
Westcott?
Yes. Okay, we are back in open session. Thank you for that lengthy closed session for the deliberations. With that being said, I'm going to move that the City of Stevens Point extend to Joseph Gemza III a probationary or conditional employment contract. It is my understanding from Chief Finn that Mr. Gemza has already satisfied all of the Commission's required hiring protocols and is available to be hired by Chief Finn pending Commission approval, and his availability would be as early as tomorrow. So that is my motion.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Carlson. All in favor of extending that contract to Mr. Gemza, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Congratulations, Joey.
Now let's shake.
We're adjourned.
Now,
Joseph.
congratulations. It was a fun interview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You get tired of shaking hands, man?
Not at all. I'll shake them all day.
Way to go, son.
Congratulations.
Thank you.